phone and I didn't turn the volume down, so I'm so grateful no one said happy birthday while I was meditating. I wanted to start with a poem, and this is a poem by Naomi Nye, and she is a Palestinian American, very famous poet. Have you heard of her? Really amazing. And this is one of her most famous poems. It's called Gate 4A. Wandering around the Albuquerque airport terminal, after learning my flight had been delayed for 4 hours, I heard an announcement. If anyone in the vicinity of Gate 4A understands any Arabic, please come to the gate immediately. Well, one pauses these days. Gate 4A was my own gate. So I went there. An older woman in full traditional Palestinian embroidered dress, just like my grandma wore, was crumpled to the floor, wailing loudly. "Help," said the flight service person. "Talk to her. What is her problem? We told her the flight was going to be late and she did this." I stooped down to put my arm around the woman and spoke to her haltingly. "Shu dawa shu bidakabiti, stani shwe mi fadlak shu bit siwi." The minute she heard any words she knew, no matter how poorly used, she stopped crying. She thought the flight had been canceled entirely. She needed to be in El Paso for a major medical treatment the next day. And I said, "You're fine, you'll get there. Who's picking you up? We'll call him." We called her son, and I spoke with him in English. I told him I would stay with his mother till we got on the plane and would ride next to her. She talked to him, then we called her other sons, just for fun. Then we called my dad, and he and she spoke for a while in Arabic, and found out, of course, that they shared 10 mutual friends. And then I thought, well, just for the heck of it, why not call some Palestinian poets I know and let her chat with them? This all took up about 2 hours. She was laughing a lot by then, telling about her life, patting my knee, answering questions. She had pulled a sack of homemade mamul cookies, little powdered sugar, crumbly mounds stuffed with dates and nuts, out of her bag and was offering them to all the women at the gate. To my amazement, not a single woman declined one. It was like a sacrament. The traveler from Argentina, the mom from California, the lovely woman from Laredo, we were all covered by the same powdered sugar and smiling. There is no better cookie. And then the airline broke out the free beverages from huge coolers, and 2 little girls from our flight ran around serving us all. And I noticed my new best friend, by now we were holding hands, had a potted plant poking out of her bag, some medicinal thing with green furry leaves. Such an old country tradition. Always carry a plant. Always stay rooted to somewhere. And as I looked around, I always cry with this poem. I practiced this morning. And as I looked around that gate of late and weary ones, I thought, this is the world I want to live in, the shared world. Not a single person in this gate, once the crying of confusion had stopped, seemed apprehensive about any other person. They took the cookies. I wanted to hug all those other women too. This can still happen anywhere. Not everything is lost. So for me, one of the things that Home in the Heart speaks to is the direct experience that we can have, like Naomi Nye did, at a gate in the middle of Albuquerque with strangers, and all of a sudden, they're not strangers. And for me, I tell stories about myself so that I don't embarrass any of my friends that I might tell stories about. So I'm going to tell you a story. It's also, for me, part of the spiritual path is really reflecting on our own experiences and allowing them to teach us anew how to move forward on the path. So when I moved from here 6.5 years ago, I moved to Bellingham, Washington, and it was a struggling little community at that point. There were about 40, 50 people, and they were pretty freaked out. And so I was able to bring my therapy skills, because I'm a marriage and family therapist as well as a minister, to them because that's what they needed the most. And gradually, the community has come together in great love and grown and grown. But my own personal experience was that I began to ache with loneliness for my friends here. Ache in a way that I had never experienced. I've lost both my parents. That was a profound grief experience, but not aching like this. And it went on and on and on. It was a horrible, horrible feeling. And nothing I did, none of my spiritual practices, and I do a lot of them, really worked to take that ache away. The loneliness was just profound. And I had signed up for a meditation retreat, which I do every year, and I had gone down to Deer Park, which is one of the monasteries that Thich Nhat Hanh's people have. And I was there, and I had a wonderful group of people. They always put you in a regional group. So I was the only one from Bellingham, but everybody else was from Washington. And you don't talk at meditation retreats except for once a day. And you get into this little group of your regional people, and you share kind of what's up for you and what the teachings have brought you. And so eventually, I began to share the loneliness and cried, and was saying how hard it was to, absolutely love what I'm doing, absolutely love the place I lived, and have this ache. And the Dharma groups, these little sharing groups, are always led by a monk. And this monk, monks are so deceptive. I don't know if you've ever noticed this. But, we used to have the Tibetans come here, and they'd come, and have you had them lately? And, there are all these little Tibetan, they're shorter than me. They're little Tibetan people, and they all wear the same thing. And we would feed them a dinner, and I'd be sitting next to one of them, and the translator would be telling me, what this guy was saying. And I'd be like, that's so nice, thinking that probably he was like a baker. And then he would be like the High Lama of the 15th generation of the 35th reincarnation of the most precious jewel, on and on and on. And PhDs over here, and, Dalai Lama's personal confidant over here. And I'd be like, oh my God, I was just talking to him like he was a baker. Well, this monk in this group at Deer Park turned out to be like the head mucky muck abbot guy of the whole place, but I didn't know that, because he said, oh, just call me, what was his name? 10 Speed. And he's young, he's like maybe 30, and 10 Speed, okay, so he's just a new monk. I'm thinking, well, not so. So finally, something led me to catch him at the end of our group, and he was really busy. I didn't know why at the time, just running the whole place, And I said, I know you're busy, and I just need to ask you a question. And he was so kind. He just stopped, very present, and said, what's your question? And I said, well, I don't know how to heal this loneliness. And he said, well, you realize what it is. And when a monk asks you that question, I don't know what happens to you, but I went completely blank. Like, no. And he said, well, it's the fear of death. And then he had to go. And you can imagine, I'm standing there going, the fear of death. What? I had nowhere to put that. And so I walked away. But I'll tell you what, the loneliness, gone. Gone. I wouldn't even talk about it for a full year because I was afraid it'd come back if I said anything. It was gone, but I still didn't understand that whole concept. I didn't understand what he was pointing to. Why would loneliness be connected to the fear of death? And remember, I'm telling you a story about myself, but I'm telling you a story about you too, right? Mary Oliver has a famous line in Wild Geese, one of her most famous poems, and it goes like this: whoever you are, no matter how lonely, the world calls to you, harsh and inviting, like the wild geese, over and over, announcing your place in the family of things. It's a beautiful line. Always makes me weep in the context of the whole poem, but I already cried once today, so we'll stop. So what I realized with home in the heart as the topic today, this was many years ago that I talked to that monk and the loneliness went away and I was left with the koan, a fear of death, and couldn't understand it for years. I ran across something that Dr. Holmes, the founder of our philosophy, said. And it's actually one of my favorite passages, but it took on a new meaning with what the monk had told me. And so this is the passage. And remember, he was writing in the era where gender writing was still the norm. And so cut him some slack. Man does not exist for the purpose of making an impression upon his environment. He does not exist to express himself in and through his environment. There is a great difference. Man does not exist to leave a lasting impression upon his environment, not at all. It is not necessary that we leave any impression. It is not necessary, if we should pass on tonight, that anyone should remember that we had ever lived. All that means anything is that while we live, we live. And wherever we go from here, we keep on living. So that's the line, that's the paragraph that I've always loved. But underneath it is this next part that I would read, of course, to my students, but it takes on new meaning with the koan, fear of death. It is quite a burden lifted, Holmes says, when we realize that we do not have to move the world. It's going to move anyway. This realization does not lessen our duty or our social obligation. It clarifies it. So what did the koan turn into for me? What I realized is that when I moved away from here, I had spent my entire adult life in Reading. I'd raised my kids here. I helped create this beautiful building. I had an amazing circle of friends and deeply loved fellow ministers and practitioners and you. And I moved to a place where I was not known. I was famous because I'm old enough to be a legacy minister. I was famous, but they didn't know me. And I wasn't known there. And so I was walking around offering who I was, but without the structures and the support of the community that knew me since I was 30, knew me. And that the fear of death was actually a way of the monk pointing to, I had let go of every attachment to move to a place to start anew. And yes, I was not known. And it was terrifying and incredibly freeing. And what was important to take away, to bring to you today, was that it doesn't really matter what we do, but it does matter that we do it. And I don't know if that makes any sense to you, but finding a home in the heart actually for me means that we let go of the trappings, the attachments, enough to realize that what we carry is the gift. that what other people know of us, how we're held in community, is lovely, usually. But more important is what we carry about ourselves in the heart of our knowing. And that as we begin to know that self and live from that place, the gift that continues to evolve in us, the evolution of our own beingness, our sacred humanness, has the opportunity to express, be clarified, as Holmes says. And it doesn't release us from the obligation of being in the world, but it clarifies what we're doing in the world. And one of the things that I've noticed is that for a lot of us, we don't think we matter. That there's so many very difficult issues in the world. Issues that seem so overwhelming, so incredibly out of our power to affect, that often what I notice in people that I'm teaching and in myself is there's this feeling like, what can I do? I mean, I'm just one person. Yeah, I can do, I can write to my congressperson, or I can, do this or that, but does it make a big difference? And there's this feeling, I don't know if you have it, of sort of hopelessness. Have you had that? With some of these larger issues, we're all going to die because the world is, changing too quickly, and there's either going to be fire or ice, and, we'll be dead. Have you had that one? I have. And likewise, so many other challenges that we're faced with. But you know what? That's actually, the thought that somehow we don't matter is actually not true. It's not true at all. It's a lie that is understandable to believe, but not true. And I'll tell you why. Because in our teaching, we understand and believe, just as all the major world traditions do, that there is only one thing happening here, and that we are all connected in that one. And like a carpet, like a beautiful Persian carpet, we're woven in this beautiful pattern of sacred humanity. And what one person does is actually more like going over to the edge of the carpet and picking it up and shaking it. What you do is like that. And the whole carpet, whether you can see it or not, begins to vibrate with the shake you've given it. You can measure it. Scientists do things like that. You matter, in other words. What you do, what you think, what you say, how you are, how I am in the world, actually matters quite a bit. And it's so easy to forget, it's so easy to not realize that every shake of the carpet moves the carpet, vibrates the carpet, sets in motion something that will affect the entire thing. So whoever you are, no matter how lonely, the world calls to you, harsh and inviting, over and over announcing your place in the family of things. It's not just a beautiful poetic line. It's the truth. It's the truth of who we are. And the other thing that our philosophy says that's so powerful, it says, and there's no accidents. There are no accidents. We don't believe that there's a single accident. Coincidences, yes. Synchronicity, yes. Accidents, not so much. And so that means that no matter how you've been feeling, there's no accident that you were born in this time. To be in this place, to shake the carpet where you stand, to use your thoughts, to train your thoughts, to shake the carpet in the way that you want the entire world to be, to allow the thoughts that are counteracting the hopelessness of our time to be in the forefront. That's what I do a lot. I can't say that every single day I don't sometimes fall into a place of, this is so hard. This is so hard. Or worry about my children and my grandchildren's world that they're inheriting. I can't say that I don't do that. But what I can say is that a long time ago I learned kind of what Annie Lamott says in one of her books. She said, let's see if I can remember it. My mind is like a bad neighborhood. I try not to go there alone. So we have a choice about how we shake the rug of entire beingness. And one of the ways of choosing is to begin to pay attention to the mind and what it's saying. And you know, it's a tricky thing, isn't it? I sometimes, because I've been doing a practice of presence for quite a while, I sometimes will be sitting somewhere and all of a sudden become aware of this incredibly thug-like thought going on in my mind without my conscious awareness. You know, just kind of in there. And it's not how I want the world to be. It's not how I want to think about myself or other people. It's not how I want to be living. And as soon as I'm aware of the thought, I can change it. And so the tricky part is to wake up to the thoughts, right? And that's the essence of spiritual practice. That's actually one of the largest spiritual practices that Science of Mind people do, is they begin to pay attention to their thoughts, their internal dialogue, and not just see it or hear it or notice it, but to change it. In the moment of recognition that that thought is not how I want my life, my world to be, to change it, to shift it, to begin to invite different thoughts. And slowly, slowly over time, what begins to happen when we do this spiritual practice, and it's a lifelong practice, as you may have noticed, is the tenor, the tone of the mind and the dialogue that's there shifts, becomes kinder, more compassionate, more lovely, more accepting, more able to see the world and to see not just the challenges, but the opportunities, and to begin to direct the mind to the opportunities that lie always before us. And when with others and the challenges arise, to be able to speak to the opportunities, to be able to be a light, a lamp, a way of being that perhaps encourages others to work with their minds, to work with their thoughts, and to put into the world a different idea, an idea that is just as likely, just as true as any other. So I'm going to close with another poem. Poetry, when I was young, was horrifying. I don't know if you had to do poetry in high school, anybody? Yeah, I hated that. I just couldn't get poetry at all. And I think it's really, as I've learned to live more and more in the present moment, that poetry has become a way of metaphorically capturing my deep experience. So this one you may have heard, because long ago when I was still here, I shared it. But maybe you haven't heard it in all those years, so I thought I would close with it. And it's by David Budbill, a wonderful poet, American poet. So this is the poem, and may it help you. Han Sam, that great and crazy, wonder-filled Chinese poet of 1,000 years ago, said, "We're all just like bugs in a bowl, all day going around never leaving their bowl. I say, that's right. Every day climbing up the steep sides and sliding back, over and over again, around and around, up and back down. Sit in the bottom of the bowl, head in your hands, cry, moan, feel sorry for yourself, or look around. See your fellow bugs. Walk around. Say, hey, how you doing? Say, hey, nice bowl. So let me do a prayer here, a treatment to take us out into that nice bowl. Here and now in this moment, I remember the truth of everyone sitting here today, listening here today. I remember that within us, around us, and operating through us is a vast, immeasurable, indescribable spirit that is intelligent and is love in action. It has no boundaries. It knows no barriers. And it flows through each of us, in each one of us, and is activated by our deeply held beliefs and ideas. And so for myself and for you, I know this day that a deep idea held carefully, consciously, mindfully, that I celebrate in this day is this. The intelligence and love that is operating through all things now operates in us in new and powerful ways. Awake again to the place we have in the family of things. I accept for myself the awareness and the ability to share the light of this spirit as it expresses through me, through you. And I know that as that light is shared, more and more of the world becomes illumined with love, intelligence, and the ability to choose wisely a good course. I know that I'm only one in a multitude of lights, and I also know that my light shines just as brightly as everyone else's and adds to the conflagration of love that Spirit is on this planet. I accept then my responsibility and the gift that I've been given to bring the light into the world in my own very unique way. I accept that same responsibility and gift for you. And I'm grateful that we're together, sharing light. And so it is. Thank you.